After another incredible weekend of football, it's Waiver Wednesday. Our first waiver wire target for Week 3 is only owned in 29% of Yahoo leagues. Washington running back J.D. McKissic is an extremely productive third down back, proving especially valuable in PPR leagues. Last season for Washington, McKissic posted career highs across the board, totaling 365 yards and 1 touchdown rushing, while also catching a whopping 80 passes for 589 yards and another 2 touchdowns through the air. Coming into this season, McKissic was surprisingly not highly valued in fantasy circles, with the expectation that second-year back Antonio Gibson would take on a more prominent role in the Washington passing game. But in Week 2, with backup Taylor Heineke under center, McKissic was a clear focal point of Washington's attack, racking up 5 receptions for 83 yards on 6 targets, while also scoring a red zone rushing touchdown. With a tough road test in Buffalo on tap for Washington, we can expect plenty of dump-offs to McKissic, with Washington likely facing a negative game script. Other running backs to consider are Sony Michel and Cordarelle Patterson. Michel will likely see a bulk of the carries for the Rams against a tough Bucs D, with Darrell Henderson likely out with a rib injury, while Patterson spiked twice in Week 2, playing as a change of pace to Mike Davis for Atlanta, and could prove to be a viable flex option with 21 total touches through 2 weeks. Our second waiver wire target is Denver quarterback Teddy Bridgewater. Written off by many who classify the gloved gunslinger as a low-ceiling game manager, Bridgewater is currently owned in just 17% of Yahoo leagues. After winning the offseason battle for Denver's starting quarterback job against Drew Lock, Teddy Two Gloves has been on an absolute tear through the first 2 weeks of the NFL season, leading Denver to an undefeated start that most did not see coming. Teddy's early season success is especially intriguing for fantasy owners, as the former Louisville star has racked up points in a hurry, hitting on 54 of 70 pass attempts for a scorching 77% completion rate, while averaging 296 yards passing per game, and throwing 4 touchdowns to no interceptions. With the lowly New York Jets traveling into the Denver altitude this weekend, pencil Teddy in for another big game and a likely 3-0 start for the Broncos. Other intriguing QB options for Week 3 include Derek Carr and Daniel Jones. Carr suffered an ankle injury during last week's win, but stayed in the game and delivered a gutsy performance, throwing for 382 yards and 2 touchdowns in the win over Pittsburgh. Carr's undefeated Raiders face the Miami Dolphins this weekend in Vegas, and possibly without Tua Tagovailoa under center for the Fins, with the second-year pro from Alabama injuring his ribs in Miami's embarrassing 35-0 shutout loss to the Buffalo Bills last week. New York Giants QB Daniel Jones is another streaming option, after possibly his best game as a pro in a heartbreaking 30-29 loss to Washington. The 30-year quarterback from Duke was efficient with his arm and electric with his legs, completing 22 of 32 passes for 249 yards with 1 touchdown and no turnovers, while also rushing for 95 yards and a touchdown on the ground. The dynamic dual threat should be in for another impressive performance this weekend, when the Atlanta Falcons travel to the Meadowlands to face the Giants in a battle between 2 winless teams, each desperate for their first victory. The waiver wire wide receiver to target for Week 3 is Minnesota slot man KJ Osborn. Currently owned in just 3% of Yahoo leagues, Osborn has seemingly come out of nowhere to make a huge impact in Weeks 1 and 2. A 2020 fifth-round pick from the University of Miami, Osborn played mostly on special teams for Minnesota last season, but showed a great connection with Kirk Cousins during this year's preseason slate. That chemistry has carried over into the regular season, with Osborn operating as the Vikings' number 3 receiver behind stars Adam Thielen and Justin Jefferson. Through 2 games, the former Hurricane has racked up 12 catches on 15 targets for 167 yards and a touchdown, averaging 14 yards per catch and over 83 yards receiving per game. With tight end Irv Smith Jr. on IR, the Vikings have been using a lot more 3 wide receiver formations, and Osborn is reaping the benefits. The speedy slot man will look to continue his success in Week 3 versus Seattle, and should be at least a flex play moving forward. Other options at wide receiver for Week 3 include Quintez Cephus and Darius Slayton. Cephus has quietly put together a solid first 2 weeks for the Lions, accumulating 7 receptions on 13 targets for 75 yards and 2 touchdowns, while also snagging a 2-point conversion. The speedy receiver is a big play waiting to happen, and should have an opportunity for another long score this week, against an aggressive Baltimore Ravens secondary that is vulnerable against the pass. New York Giants wide receiver Darius Slayton is another player to target on the waiver wire. Despite dropping a potential game-winning touchdown against Washington in Week 2, Slayton has had back-to-back weeks with at least 3 catches and 50 yards, seeing 13 total targets, and snagging a red zone touchdown. With Kenny Golladay apparently more focused on venting his frustrations than catching footballs, Slayton is a sneaky ad this week against an atrocious Falcons secondary that was burned by Bucs wide receivers for a combined 10 catches for 142 yards and 3 touchdowns in Week 2. The tight end position in fantasy is a barren wasteland, but diving deep into the waiver wire dumpster, my favorite tight end option for Week 3 is Arizona Cardinals tight end Maxx Williams. A A former first-round pick of the Baltimore Ravens, Williams is finally getting a shot as a starting tight end after dealing with injuries much of the last few seasons in the desert. Owned in just 1% of Yahoo leagues, the big-bodied blocker did put up a donut in Week 1, but in Week 2 we saw a glimpse of what Williams can bring to the Cardinals' passing attack. Williams caught all 7 of his targets for 94 yards against the Vikings, and even in an offense loaded with talent, Williams could become a trusted safety valve for Kyler Murray in the short and intermediate passing game. A juicy date with Jacksonville awaits in Week 3, as the Jaguars just allowed 8 catches for 57 yards and a touchdown to the Denver tight end duo of Noah Fant and Albert O in Week 2. Owners looking for other options at tight end could take a chance on Austin Hooper or Jack Doyle. With Browns wide receivers Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham both battling injuries, Cleveland quarterback Baker Mayfield may rely more on his big tight end against the Bears. After catching all 3 of his targets for just 27 yards in Week 1, Hooper caught all 5 of his targets for 40 yards in Week 2, and may see another increase in opportunities going forward. Another sleeper for Week 3, Indianapolis Colts tight end Jack Doyle has also seen his usage grow over the first 2 weeks of the season. After catching 3 of the 4 passes thrown his way for 21 yards in the season opener, the big tight end showed up in a big way in Week 2, grabbing 5 of his 8 targets for 64 yards and adding a 2-point conversion. With Colts second-year QB Jacob Eason potentially making his first career start in Week 3, Doyle should be a steady presence in the middle of the field and a reliable option for owners desperate for tight end production. By far the best streaming option for defenses in Week 3, the Carolina Panthers defense is set to face a Houston Texans team that is preparing a third-round rookie to start at quarterback on a short week. Former Stanford signal caller Davis Mills will be the sacrificial lamb on Thursday Night Football after starting QB Tyrod Taylor was placed on short-term IR due to a hamstring injury. Led by edge rusher Brian Burns, linebacker Shaq Thompson, and rookie first-round pick J.C. Horn at corner, the suffocating Carolina defense has held opposing offenses to just 190 total yards per game and has already racked up 3 interceptions as well as a league-leading 10 sacks in the first 2 games of the season, and will look to turn up the heat on the Texans rookie QB on Thursday night. Other defenses to consider for Week 3 include the Las Vegas Raiders and the Tennessee Titans, as both teams potentially face backup QBs in their first starts of the season or quarterbacks playing with injuries. What did you think of my top 5 waiver wire targets for Week 3? Will any of these players continue their early season success? Let me know in the comments section below, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already for more NFL content just like this.